Springfield's Talk 104.1. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday. My name is Nick Reed. Great to have you here. It is just great to have you here. Friday, we have a happy hour.
That's
Yes,
right.
indeedy do. Well, what's wrong with your voice over there?
I lost it on Friday, and it's just now coming
I
back.
remember Friday out at Scramblers. Yeah, you were kind of on a little bit of the struggle bus.
Yeah,
Just a bit. So it went away.
it
You lost it.
completely.
Well, glad it's coming back.
I know. I'm a little
Do you, do you
sultry.
do you feel? Did you feel ill, or was it just the voice went away?
I mean, I was a little under the weather,
Okay,
but too crazy.
you sound a little congested over there. I'm sure you'll be fine.
Be all
I
right.
bet you'll survive.
Friday.
By Friday, and if not, they got a little, a little of the stuff cures what ails you. Have a hot toddy, maybe that should help. You have enough of those, you could just sing like a bird. I like hot toddies. It's worth faking being sick over to get one of those made for you and to legitimately drink. It's back in the good old days, that was medicine. By gosh, it certainly worked. Hope everybody we had best of yesterday, so I hope everyone enjoyed their Independence Day weekend. I know I certainly did. Got to spend it with family, siblings, all the siblings together, 6 of us in total, and it isn't that often. I think last year we actually started, unbeknownst to us at the time, I believe, a tradition of getting together over the 4th as siblings, and that's just, I don't know, one of my sisters who lives on the other side of the state said, hey, I think we can all get together, and we did, because at that point, literally all over the world, and so we're like, that was so much fun. Let's do it again. We did it again. I think we're going to do it again next 4th. So just want to let everybody know. I think it's very important for you to know exactly what I'm doing all the time. All right, so we do have Happy Hour Friday. A lot of stuff to cover. This flooding taking place in Texas, clearly getting a lot of attention, and unfortunately, it is one of these instances in which we have on full display the absolute best of humanity, and then, unfortunately, on the other end of the spectrum, the worst of humanity. While there are people who have lost their lives, knowing full well that they probably would, as they attempted the selfless act of putting their life on the line in order to try and save others. And then there are depraved human beings who try and figure out, how can we use this politically? How is it that we can try and use this to attack Trump? I'm pretty, I don't know, instinctive when it comes to, I wonder how they're going to blame Trump for this one. I wonder how they're going to blame Trump for this one. I must admit, and, of course, over the weekend, doing vacationing and so forth, so not maybe in my normal evaluation mindset, but whenever we're talking about this flooding that's going on, and in fact, one of my siblings lives in Texas, and so he's obviously very familiar with the area and so forth, and we're having this conversation, and it just didn't even really cross my mind, how is it that they're going to try to blame this on Trump? Because it just seemed like one of those things that of all the just because kids are involved, and the clear nature of this clearly being something that is out of the blue, and it's sometimes these things happen that are just, I don't know, you'd think that people wouldn't go the political route. And I was just not shocked, but I thought, man, so quickly. And I just can't imagine being that way. I mean, the sick nature, when there are families praying that their children will be found, when there are families who already know that they've lost family members, and that there are but some people's minds, instead of, especially if you have kids, how can we blame Trump for this? There's something deeply, deeply wrong with these individuals out there. And if I would argue, if you are one of those people, You need to fix yourself. That's not normal behavior. Now, that isn't to say when something like this occurs, there is an evaluation of, okay, is there something that could have happened differently that may have prevented these deaths from occurring? That's a perfectly not just reasonable, but I would argue responsible approach. But that's not what happens here. Before, again, even there is a total death count, how can we draw this back? Let's work this backwards and figure out how it is to blame Donald Trump. There have been a few Democrats. There's one, in fact, elected Democrat whose name I wasn't familiar with, who had posted anyone. She's a Democrat. And while a lot of people in the media were running around saying, oh, look, because of Doge, because of the cuts, because of the big, beautiful bill, she noted that stuff doesn't even kick in until 2026. And anyone who is trying to use something like that at a time like this is depraved. I don't think she used the word depraved, but she was very, very clear that is an extremely dark, unnecessary, and horrific place for people to try to politicize it. And she was calling out her own party for it, and good for her. Unfortunately, she appears to be the exception instead of the rule. The count up until the latest is they're saying 100 deaths. There's still people missing. And we will run down the latest information of what is known and what things that reasonable people are looking at and saying, okay, well, why did this not happen and could it have happened? And, again, newsflash, it wasn't because of any cuts to federal spending and the National Weather Service and all this sort of fear-mongering. There also was an arrest made, an attempt to ambush ICE agents. This is not a surprise. We've been talking about this is the inevitable outcome of having an entire political party, along with the media, painting ICE agents as Nazis. At times, falsely accusing them of being extremely heavy-handed. And you see a lot of these local stories that pop up. There was one a couple of weeks ago. In fact, it was out in California, and it showed these ICE agents. And I mean, look how brutal they're handing this poor working man here. I think it was in California. It may have been the greater Los Angeles area. And it got some local coverage, and it was video that somebody shot. And just look at how rough they're being with him. Well, what they didn't include in that was the moments prior in which that illegal immigrant was coming at law enforcement with a weed eater that he was operating. And they would, a day later, have to acknowledge that it was edited footage, and oh yeah, we forgot to add this part in. But it's that constant attempt to demonize law enforcement officials. It is that constant attempt to convince people that this is about good and evil, and you're on the side of good. And when you do that long enough and loud enough, you will have people that feel it is not just acceptable, but virtuous to try and take these people out. And that is what has occurred. We'll have audio of Homan, who had said, you hate to say, he doesn't say, I hate to say I told you so, but this is what I predict. This isn't difficult stuff to predict is going to occur. This is what is so frustrating about it, that given the obvious outcome, what we know is the left, they know this is what they are trying to do. And then, of course, we have the FBI claiming that Epstein didn't have a client list. And I mean, this is something that the Trump administration has got to address. This cannot simply be put out through some sort of press release and this sort of, well, there's, given the buildup, given what we all know as American citizens through observation about what our government has done, hasn't done, there has got to be some sort of detailed explanation as to why it is that we are seemingly, when it comes to this whole Epstein situation, in the exact same place that we were during the Biden administration. And that is nothing to see here. There is a massive amount of credibility on the line. Weather coming up looks like, you just look at the forecast and a chance for rain from now until Kingdom Come. All of that ahead. Right now, latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a slight chance for scattered showers in the afternoon, otherwise mostly sunny with a high near 88. Tonight mostly cloudy with a low around 70. For your Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 88. And looking at the Thursday, sunny skies with a high near 90.
All right, so the FBI is claiming that Epstein did not have a client list. This is, I believe, this has got to be addressed in some sort of real official capacity. I think that Trump has to address this. There's a massive credibility deal here. And it was weeks ago that you had both of the FBI, of course, Director Kash Patel and then Bongino, that said, Epstein killed himself. We've seen this stuff. You just, kind of trust us. And they should, I think I understand that these are two individuals that recognize that they do have credibility on their side, But we cannot have, even if you have credibility on your side, people in those positions that say, well, just because we said so. We've seen it. Don't worry about it. We can't do that. The FBI released a 2-page memo Sunday concluding that Epstein did not have a client list that he used for blackmail. The FBI also determined that Epstein did commit suicide in August of 2019. Now, there are a couple of things about this. First, the release tape. A Gateway pundit has a piece that notes on the footage that is said to show outside his cell, there is a timestamp on it, and the Gateway pundit shows that there is a 60-second skip in the clock that it jumps from it's like 11:58 to 12 or something along those lines. It's 60 seconds. And when you watch the video that is on the Gateway pundit piece, it does show just that. Now, I do believe that needs to be addressed. It seems odd to me, I will say. So the implication, the inference some people are going to take away from this is, okay, well, that 60 seconds, that is gone, that disappeared. Why did it disappear? What happened during that 60-second period of time and so forth? I find it just, I do, as incompetent as government can be, to me, it seems as if you would recognize, hey, if we cut out, let's say there's something nefarious there that the deep state does not want the American people to see, somebody going into the cell, coming out of the cell, whatever it happens to be, and they say, let's cut that. The timestamp is there. I just can't imagine, in this day and age, as easily as it is, or as easy as it is oftentimes to detect when there are edits that are made, things are on the internet, you have internet sleuths and so forth, that you would not go to extreme lengths in editing something like that to make sure that you're not, that there's not something in it that shows it was edited, right? I mean, you're going to want it to be as foolproof as possible so that in, even things that might be legitimate but could look funny, you would want to go to great lengths in order to make sure what you released was something that didn't give people any room whatsoever to doubt it. So to have a video released, as it has been presented by Gateway Pundit, with a timestamp that skips a full 60 seconds, that is just this huge window of, well, what the heck is that? Now, I'm always trying to think, how could that happen? Like, what could be the reasons for something like that? Could it be some sort of, just accidental, weird sort of glitch? Maybe it could be. Couldn't happen to a worse tape. This clearly isn't the sort of thing that, you'd see it and you'd think, oh man, boy, does this open us up for something? Is there, of course, what it is presented by Gateway Pundit itself? Maybe that is an error. Maybe, what Gateway Pundit got a hold. I'm just trying to think of these different scenarios in which, okay, well, maybe it just appears as if there's a skip and their file, for whatever reason, did have a weird skip in it, but that wasn't in the original file. Which, once again, that would be a serious, unfortunate thing to occur for a tape that is so significant. Maybe in the very beginning, Let's say that there was someone that went into the cell and did something, and then you just had immediately say, that person go to whomever it is that had access to the security tapes and told them, I'm going to stand here right now, and you're going to delete that thing. We know where your kid goes to school. We know where where your wife works. We know this and that. Just delete it out, just to get it done and taken care of, knowing full well that, yeah, there's going to be potentially a timestamp there, and that's a problem. But odds are this tape's not going to get out anyhow, because, of course, the people that are in power in the deep state. But just in case somebody does get in the position of power to release the tape, even though that timestamp skip will be there, that's better than having video of somebody going into a cell and coming back out 30 seconds later. Is 60 seconds enough time to do what, to arrange for it to look like a suicide anyhow? Or maybe they just went in, snapped his neck, walked out. This is what occurs, of course, when you have a government that has demonstrated that you can't trust it. But then also online, you have the so-called video proof that nobody entered or exited his cell during that period of time, and then there appears to be 60 seconds missing. And we may find out again that, that's not the case. That was a goof. That was bad reporting. That was bad information that was provided. And so, okay, here's the other scenario. And this does oftentimes occur. You could have some sort of operation here in which you do get into the hands of right-wing media a video that appears to have a skip in it, missing content, that isn't legitimate, so that you can discredit outlets that question whether or not there was some sort of conspiracy and that involved killing Epstein. Like, well, look, they also had this video floating around falsely claiming that there was missing time on it. And so it could be used as an operation to discredit people that are asking questions. These are all the possibilities. I do want to play audio coming up. There's a former CIA operative that was on with, I believe, Jesse Waters, that flat out said, this is all total BS. I know how these people operate, and this idea that there's no Epstein list and that this videotape is that it's all total and complete BS. We'll play that audio in just moments. Pyramid Roofing Company, talk and text line 447 KSGF. I'm Nick Reed. We're going to get a traffic update, read some of your text messages on the Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line, then audio from a former CIA operative saying that the claim that there was no blackmail list from Epstein and the footage that was released that is said to show no one entered or left his cell. All of that is BS, that none of this information is information you can believe. So his audio next. I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast
I
from
could do weather for you if you want.
No, it's all right. I got it. Unless you're getting a lot of complaints.
No, I
Okay.
just didn't want you to overexert yourself.
Right.
Okay.
This is sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a slight chance for scattered showers in the afternoon, otherwise mostly sunny with a high near 88. Tonight mostly cloudy with a low around 70. For your Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 88. And looking at to Thursday, sunny skies with a high near 90.
The FBI released a memo Sunday night. Axios reported on the new FBI DOJ memo obtained by Axios, concluding Jeffrey Epstein did not even have a client list that he used for blackmail. Now, I would say that is that's a pretty specific declaration regarding a list. You can say there could be some sort of quote unquote list, but they found that it wasn't ever used for blackmail. That there was a list with lots of names on it, but there this wasn't some official blackmail list that Epstein used in order to blackmail people. I suspect he never had to blackmail anyone. officially. I suspect that he never had to. I think that any sort of list is more just about protection than anything. You get enough really high-level, very important people with connections as clients, you have this built-in protection because in order for you to, well, though this appears to have not been the case, perhaps not in Epstein's mind, as secure of a plan as he may have thought, that, well, I'm going to be protected because in order for me to get in trouble, these very high, powerful people are going to have to be exposed. So it's sort of like a vaccine from any accountability, that wall, that barrier of important people, and believing that, well, I'm never going to go down because those people would have to go down as well. And if that was his thinking, he was wrong. He's clearly very wrong. A former CIA operative on with Jesse Waters asked about this declaration in this memo from the FBI, saying there's no blackmail list, and also this release of the video that is said to show no one entered or exited his cell. Though Gateway Pundit notes that in the version that they have posted, there is 60 seconds that is missing without explanation. Here's a former CIA operative.
Yeah, and we don't know if the files have been destroyed. We don't know if they're still being hidden. We don't know anything. It's hard to know what goes on behind closed doors. John, you're familiar with the way intelligence agencies operate. This guy, Epstein, was accused of being intel. Do you think this adds up?
No, I don't think this adds up. You've hit it on the head, and so has Barry. I think you're both exactly right on this. We really don't know anything because the FBI doesn't want us to know anything. I'm not blaming the FBI director, Kash Patel, or the deputy director, Dan Bongino. I think that layer beneath them, that's part of what we like to call the deep state, has taken this bull by the horns, and they've probably destroyed information. Look at what the CIA did in 1975 after Congress ordered that it release all of its files related to an operation called MK Ultra. The director of the CIA went back to headquarters and ordered everything to be destroyed. And in the end, only about 20% of the documents survived. We're still learning about the FBI's operations against Martin Luther King 55 years after the fact. So now we're supposed to believe that everybody's telling the truth, that there were no files, there were no dossiers. I'm sorry, I just don't buy it because I know how these people operate.
Yeah, and Bondi and Cash and Bongino, they're great Americans. And,
yes.
But this stinks. This just reeks.
I have long thought it almost seemed inconceivable that there would be somewhere officially, legitimately, all of this information that has some of these people dead to rights. Not that it was impossible, but given how corrupt we have seen, at least within certain levels of the FBI is, to me it seemed at least plausible that either any of these files would have been destroyed or they would have been kept hidden somewhere so that the FBI could use it for blackmail. Not Epstein, but the FBI could use this information for blackmail in order to get what they wanted. That, to me, seemed to make much more sense than having what is believed to have been by a lot of people. I mean, it's, you just go back to the common sense aspect of this. If there weren't any people paying to statutorily rape underage girls, then why did Jeffrey Epstein go to jail in the first place? Why is his girlfriend, former girlfriend, why is she sitting in prison today? This is the part that you just get right back to the very basics of this. And individuals that want to play this off oftentimes as, well, just conspiracy theory and there's nothing to see here. How can there not be anything to see? Why did Epstein go to prison? Why is Ghislaine in prison? for sex trafficking. Well, that means somebody had to be buying the goods. I mean, that's just obvious. That's clear. That doesn't take a conspiracy mind in order to believe that. If anything, the conspiracy mind would have to believe that there aren't any, because then you're saying, what, was he just set up? Because the implication here is that there were no individuals, be they high profile and powerful or otherwise, that were purchasing a day pass at rape camp. That's just not that doesn't add up. I'm going to play audio. I'm going to try to because I don't have this captured and saved, but I think I'm going to be able to stream it. Yesterday, Caroline Leavitt from the White House asked about much of this information.
DOJ and FBI have now concluded there was no Jeffrey Epstein client list. What do you tell MAGA supporters who say they want anyone involved in Jeffrey Epstein's alleged crimes to be held accountable?
This administration wants anyone who has ever committed a crime to be held accountable. And I would argue this administration has done more to lock up bad guys than certainly the previous administration. And the Trump administration is committed to truth and to transparency. That's why the Attorney General and the FBI Director pledged at the president's direction to do an exhaustive review of all of the files related to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and his death. And they put out a memo in conclusion of that review. There was material they did not release because, frankly, it was incredibly graphic and it contained child pornography, which is not something that's appropriate for public consumption. But they committed to an exhaustive investigation. That's what they did, and they provided the results of that. That's transparency.
Oh,
Sure.
this systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. So what happened to the Epstein client list that the Attorney General said she had on her desk?
Well, I think if you go back and look at what the Attorney General said in that interview, which was on your network on Fox News, go ahead.
DOJ Epstein's client will really happen. And she said, it's sitting on my desk right now to review.
Yes, she was saying the entirety of all of the paperwork, all of the paper in relation to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. That's what the Attorney General was referring to, and I'll let her speak for that. But again, when it comes to the FBI and the Department of Justice, they are more than committed to ensuring that bad people are put behind bars. They have an operation going on right now called Summer Heat, which has our murder rate trending in the lowest direction in United States history. Their emphasis on violent crime and locking up violent criminals has led to the arrest of 14,000 violent criminals. That's a 62% increase from the same time period last year. So this Attorney General and the FBI Director are committed to putting bad people behind bars where they belong. They promised an exhaustive review. That's what they did. For any further details, I would refer you to the Department of Justice.
All right, so that was yesterday, some of the questioning of the White House press secretary. This is just, it's not going to fly. It has, and I'm not saying this is the case, but it has all of the hallmarks of a complete and total cover-up and diversion. Asking specifically about this, well, we have this other operation going on, and nobody's been more committed to arresting murderers. Okay, that doesn't have anything to do with this. That has nothing to do with this whatsoever. Talking about all of the positive and successful things that you're doing over here in column A doesn't have anything to do with what is going on in column B. And Peter Doocy was the second person to ask a question there with the exact quote of Pam Bondi, Attorney General, saying, I've got the list on my desk. And then to be told, well, there is no list. Now, is some of this semantics? When Caroline Leavitt was talking about a list, is she talking about a list of names that were in some sort of book? But what the White House is now, or the FBI is now talking about is, well, that wasn't necessarily a list of people that are known to have been purchasing young girls to rape on Epstein Island. And that can be two different things. I mean, simply because Jeffrey Epstein had, a book with names and contact, that doesn't mean that every single person in that particular book is somebody that utilized his services. Now, he might have a book for that, but perhaps he just had one book and it had non-rapers in it as well as the rapers in it. And so, there, and again, this I can see as being reasonable if there are individuals in there that you do believe, or at the very least, there's no evidence that they actually did anything, that they ever were at the island. I can understand not wanting to release those people's names because, I mean, just imagine if you're somebody that knew Jeffrey Epstein and you did work with him and he had your information, but you didn't have any idea about an island and your name gets released, your life could be completely destroyed because of the inference many people would take, particularly if you're high profile and all of a sudden you're going to have cameras following you around and you got a wife, you got kids, you got family, and you really genuinely didn't do anything, but you can't prove you didn't, and here you are on this list. So if you're dealing with a situation like that, I understand saying we aren't going to be able to release that, those names. The problem is none of this is being explained in a way that is satisfactory, and you're going to always have some people that no matter what you say, they're going to believe that there is some sort of cover-up. And again, that's not paranoia. That is an educated assessment based off what we've learned about our own government, particularly the FBI over the past several years. That's a perfectly reasonable response and of a person who's paying attention to what's going on. But to go from people walking out of the White House with empty binders, to go from you just wait until this gets released, there's going to be, crazy stuff in it, it's on my desk, to, oh, the full transparency is the fact that we're telling you that there's nothing there. It's just not going to fly with people. And if this is a case in which they've gotten in there and they realize that there are elements within the FBI that they aren't even able to track down, but they have destroyed the evidence and they have managed to wipe everything clean that could have any sort of negative implications on high and powerful people. They need to say that. And if there is an attempt to try and rehabilitate the reputation of the FBI, and there are concerns that if they put that out there, it's going to appear as if we aren't able to clean up the mess because it's just too big. You're doing more harm than good, because all this, I believe, does for the average person is makes them believe that Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi and all of these individuals are either misleading us because they are covering something up for powerful people that are allies of Trump or whatever, or that they aren't able to clean things up and are unwilling to admit that, which means that we're not going to be able to rely on getting the truth out of these individuals. The way I evaluate this is the sort of answers that are coming out, and what we heard yesterday, the audio I just played of the press secretary in the White House, is the sort of answer, frankly, probably would have gotten from the Biden administration had Karine Jean-Pierre been asked the question. Divert by talking about how we're on top of crime and we're, record high number of arrests for murders and so forth, and just sort of divert and conflate what we're doing over here in order to fight crime with what is actually happening over here. And I just don't think that is going to, nor should it be expected to satisfy people. And I also don't like the premise of the question. I think it was a Newsmax reporter. Well, what is your explanation to MAGA supporters in MAGA world? No, that's not what this should be about. This isn't something that should be seen through the lens of, well, only Trump supporters have concerns about this. This is about the rule of law. And when it really comes right down to it, ultimately, they can release all the videotapes they want about Epstein and his cell. They can make all the claims that they want about, well, there's no list. But the fact of the matter is, Epstein went to prison for a reason. His girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, whatever you become as a girlfriend whenever your boyfriend dies. I don't know what, it's not like a widow, but why is she sitting in prison? They were selling underage girls to men so that they could have sex with them. This would be like putting someone in prison because they are, selling drugs to people on a mass scale, but then claiming that there actually wasn't anyone buying the drugs. Well, that doesn't add up, does it? And to expect people to believe that there were actually no criminals purchasing these girls, but we went ahead and put Epstein and his girlfriend in prison for selling them to people that don't exist, that defies all reality. Springfield's Talk. I'll get some of your text messages coming up. Traffic update. I'm Nick Reed. Home loan needs, I want a great homeloan.com. I mean, you can get a home loan, you can get refinancing, you can get reverse mortgage, but you want it to be great? Why wouldn't you? I mean, I don't know, maybe that's too much for you in life. Maybe you're one of these people. I suppose if you're a liberal, you like to be miserable, you like to complain, then you might go the route of not wanting a great home loan. But if you have expectations of the best possible, then I highly recommend, as I have used and so many of you have used when it comes to home loans, when it comes to refinancing, when it comes to reverse mortgages, or just any questions regarding any of it at all, I want a great homeloan.com, even if it's a second opinion. And here's the thing, that approval, that pre-approval that says, yep, you're good for it, that's good for 120 days. So it doesn't mean, well, we're going to do it, and then we got to have find a house in 30 days, otherwise it expires. 120 days. Gives you plenty of wiggle room, lots of time. I want a great homeloan.com because you do. All right, some of your text messages. We're just going to pop through these. Let's see. Is today the 8th? Okay, let's try to separate these. Okay, these are in the context of Epstein and the FBI saying that there was no blackmail list and he didn't kill himself. There's no difference from Biden to Trump with the FBI. They are a corrupt organization, proved as such, and the only solution to that problem is disbanding them. It is proven that you cannot trust anything out of that department. Let's see. If all the cameras are missing that same 60 seconds, it's a system reboot, but they better show in the system that it's designed for reboot at that time. That is in reference to the Gateway Pundit. I'm sure others as well have released video that is supposed to be showing that no one entered or exited Epstein's cell, and there's an apparent skip of 60 seconds where it goes from like 11:58 to 12 o'clock straight up. I believe there is an Epstein list. However, they will not make it public because there are powerful and prominent people in it. Also, it could be a ploy when it is announced that it was going to go public to make a trade deal with those countries, kind of like a blackmail list. Just my tinfoil thought for the day. Another, Epstein, a finance guy. I think Epstein handled all these people's dirty investments. He probably was the client for all these girls. But his financial crimes he probably helped with is way worse than him running a hooker island. I had asked the question, what is the term for a girlfriend or boyfriend that is left behind? Because, you got widow. And you're like, okay, well, if you're just a boyfriend or girlfriend, what exactly is that? And one of you had, let's see, texted in, for a boyfriend who has lost his girlfriend, the term widower is not typically used. The most accurate term is bereaved boyfriend or surviving partner. Okay, I'll take that. Back to your other text messages. The CIA had 5 years to remove all incriminating evidence against any important people. That evidence was scrubbed the day after it was confiscated. Another saying, Tim Pool had an interesting take on his podcast. In short, there's so many CEOs, etc., on the list that the economy would crash if all these people were brought to justice. Another, I read something that Elon Musk said. The reason they're saying there's no list is because Trump's name's on it. But I thought years ago that that when this first came out, Trump found out what Epstein was doing and kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. Don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but now, so this Elon Musk did, when they were in the middle of this fight, say, well, Trump's name is on the list, or suggest that. The Mar-a-Lago thing, actually, that was well before Epstein's name was known to the world, and as the story goes, and it's never been disputed, well before Epstein was facing all of these problems he was facing, Trump had gotten word that Epstein had made inappropriate gestures towards one of his female employees that was much younger in age, and so he booted him and banned him from Mar-a-Lago. So I would note that Donald Trump, at this point, is the only human being we're aware of that made some sort of move against Epstein like that because of what it was that, in that instance, simply making inappropriate, like hitting on some girl that maybe was underage. And Trump's the only person that made any move like that before it was popular to distance oneself from Epstein. What this means is that there are names on that contact list. Even the administration doesn't want coming out. They found out something really bad about people labeled currently really good. Somebody somewhere is sitting on a massive get-out-of-jail-free card and using it to get something, or they are protecting people. And as I'd mentioned earlier, the irony of that approach, if that's the approach that Epstein took, right? That this is a list that's going to protect me. Having this list, having all of these people purchase underage girls to rape on my island is going to be my ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card, that could be the very thing that ended up being his demise. Traffic update, I'm Nick Reed. I will say one thing I just don't think also adds up is this idea that the reason the list isn't going to be released and that there is a list, this is all a big lie, is because Trump is implicated in it. I just don't think that makes any sense, that Trump would have made that such a focus of something he was going to release if he was implicated in it from the first place, because now there's so much attention paid to it. All right, we got news in 60 seconds. I'm Nick Reed. All right, everyone. Pinnaker Honda, they got some kicking deals going on for the Independence Day month of July. Fabulous interest rates available as low as 0.99% on select new vehicles. The electric Honda Prologue as low as 2.49% on the new Honda Hybrid and the Honda CRV. You can lease one of the smaller SUVs, the new Honda HRV or a new Honda CRV for as low as $298 if you're a leaser. I'm a buyer. Never leased a vehicle. Some people are leasers, some are buyers. I'm a buyer. They also want to buy your vehicle. They are especially looking for quality used Hondas, offering top dollar for the vehicle plus an additional $1,000 towards your trade with the purchase of a new Honda. So it is a fantastic time to trade up if you are a Honda loyalist and you are wanting to get into a new one, get that top dollar. They have the largest selection of certified pre-owned Hondas in the area, over 100 certified U.S. Hondas on the lot as we speak. That is Pinnaker Honda, family-owned. The good folks there on South Campbell, just south of Walnut Lawn. You can also find them online, of course, ksgf.com, Nick's endorsements. Just I want to get a couple more of these text messages in before we get to news regarding the Epstein list that apparently doesn't exist. And thus far, the White House's response has been kind of like, oh, yeah, that's just, the way it is. And that's, transparency. Because we're telling you that there's nothing to see here. Well, it's just none of it adds up. I, once again, go back to just the sheer fact that people went to prison for selling these children to individuals for the purposes of having sex with them. So it's kind of hard then to claim that we don't have any information on any of those people. Now, someone had texted in and said, hey, I think that people still need to be patient. I believe that they have to build each case so that there is no room for doubt. They have to keep all information secret and in order to protect against leaks. That is possible. I believe that if that is the case, it needs to be explained. Because at this point, I don't think it's an unfair assessment. My assessment is that this is sort of like, hey, nothing to see here. And I just don't believe that is going to fly with people. Someone else noted in terms of the belief or the possibility that the reason this isn't getting released is because Trump is implicated in it, noting that if Trump were implicated in it, that would have been leaked out a long time ago. I mean, this is an FBI that made up stuff in order to try and overthrow the Trump administration. Flat out made up stuff. Pretended to believe, and we now know that they knew it wasn't true, but pretended to believe that Russia was coordinating with the Trump campaign in order to rig our elections. For all of the attempts that the FBI has made in order in the past to try and jail Trump, to try and overthrow his presidency or prevent him from being president, I think it is a strong argument that if there were something there, that would have been released. Now, some could say, well, but if that was released, then they would also have to release, everybody else. No, they wouldn't. I mean, just by the nature of that being a corrupt move in and of itself, they certainly would not have to release anybody else that might be allies of the Democrat Party. And his cellmate gave an interview, and he claims that Epstein told him that folks from the Biden Justice Department came to him asking him if he would point the finger at Trump. And Epstein, according to his cellmate at one point, Epstein told him that they said, you don't even have to have proof of it. We just need something to get impeachment hearings rolling. Now, of course, that is somebody who's in prison making a claim about what he was told from someone who doesn't exist any longer. So I don't know how much stock you can necessarily put into that. However, if it comes to believing the word of somebody who is sitting in federal prison versus what it is that we're hearing from the FBI, kind of a toss-up, I think, frankly, which is a sad thing to say. And again, none of this helps instill any sort of trust in the FBI or in the belief that, at least on some level, while Kash Patel and Dan Bongino might be able to correct the course, that when it comes to some of this really bad stuff, they aren't able to get a handle on it. And not where it stands now, none of it is good for anybody. I mean, other than people on the Epstein list. And this is why I think Trump has to address this. Because Trump very clearly said when he was running for president that he would release that list. I mean, he listed a number of things: the JFK files, the Epstein, and his attorney general saying, "Yeah, the list is on my desk," and then, "Oh, there is no list." That you can't do that and expect people to credibly believe it. Whatever the reason, whatever is going on, whatever the explanation, I think that there has to be that information provided to the American people. This isn't the sort of thing that they can just expect people. I mean, I guess they don't have to. But I would venture to say a vast majority of Trump supporters believe that this is BS. It would be interesting polling to see amongst the general population and then specifically Trump supporters. But I suspect a vast majority don't believe it. They don't believe this new messaging that there's nothing to see here. We've got weather coming up here in a moment. Pyramid Roofing Company, talk at text line 447 KSGF. Now news.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a slight chance for scattered showers in the afternoon, otherwise mostly sunny with a high near 88. Tonight mostly cloudy with a low around 70. For your Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 88. And taking a look at Thursday, sunny skies with a high near 90.
All right. So the Biden's doctor was called to testify. This is part of the hearings that have been going on behind closed doors regarding the cognitive decline of Biden and who was running things and who knew when and who knew what and so forth and so forth. And so this House Oversight Committee had informed him, yeah, we need you to come testify. Kevin O'Connor, he was scheduled to testify Wednesday, tomorrow, but is now, according to Fox News, in disagreement with the committee over the scope of the questions he'll be expected to answer during his testimony. A lawyer for O'Connor requested the testimony be delayed until July 28th or August 4th in a letter to Connor. Quote, Dr. O'Connor has legal and ethical obligations that he must satisfy and for which violations carry serious consequences to him professionally and personally. Now, you have a response, we're unaware of any prior occasion, this is also from O'Connor's attorney saying we're unaware of any prior occasion on which a congressional committee has subpoenaed a physician to testify about the treatment of an individual patient, and the notion that a congressional committee would do so without any regard whatsoever for the confidentiality of the physician-patient relationship is alarming. Well, the reason, aside from the relationship component to this between doctor-patient, yeah, this has never been done before. But we also never had, at least that we know of, a cover-up of this extent of the cognitive disability of a president of the United States with his physician out there claiming he was perfectly fine. So this is new territory. But this isn't new territory because Republicans are just looking for something to do. This is new territory because the Biden administration and Democrats conspired for years to cover up the cognitive decline, the mental health, the overall health of this president, to the point where it became clear he wasn't even running the country. I mean, we're at the point we're trying to figure out who was running the country. Now, the doctor-patient relationship component, and I suspect Democrats are suddenly going to really care about this, to me gets a little bit murky because it isn't as if this is a physician that has always been expected to not talk about Biden's health. This would be one thing if this were Biden's physician and the relationship he had with Biden was one in which he never ever spoke about Biden's health. But that's not what happened here. This is an individual who had claimed Biden was just fine, fit for duty, who utilized his credibility as Biden's physician to mislead the American people into believing that he was perfectly fine. And I think that a valid question is, well, does that not mean that he already was allowed to break that patient-doctor confidentiality? Does it still apply? I think that many people would argue that it doesn't work that way. You don't get to say, oh, yeah, no, I'm perfectly free to discuss my patient's health issues, and they're all just fine. But then when it turns out that, you know, the health issues aren't just fine, that there are real problems there, to go, oh, wait a minute, I can't talk about this because of patient-doctor confidentiality. It doesn't really work that way. I don't think it works that way. You either acknowledge it and respect it, or you don't. It is either waived or it is not waived. And I'm not sure, though there may be a legal argument that you can waive it as long as the physician is lying about your health. But the moment that people begin asking questions about what it is that has been revealed or told to the American people, and it conflicts with what we have subsequently learned was, the reality of what's going on with his health, that all of a sudden you can clam up and say, oh, I'm not allowed to talk about that. Wasn't that convenient for you? Now, the response to this is he doesn't have to answer questions that if there's a certain area that we're asking him questions he's uncomfortable with because he feels that it is a violation of his oath, then he doesn't have to answer the question. We're not saying that when he gets back here, he has to answer every single question. Now, of course, what is being suggested is that they may issue a subpoena. And in fact, let's see, this was a request for testimony. A spokesperson for the Oversight Committee replied in a statement that O'Connor and his legal team were merely trying to stonewall the process. The committee said O'Connor is welcome to object to individual questions during his testimony, but O'Connor is not allowed in the committee's view to delay or decline a congressional subpoena due to concerns over questions about potentially privileged information. So if he has been subpoenaed, he doesn't show up. Again, this should be the Steve Bannon treatment. Throw him in jail. Steve Bannon did not comply with the subpoena to come testify because he argued that there was privileged information, that there was executive privilege at play, and that he was not required because of that particular privilege to come and speak to the committee, and they put him in jail for it. The great frustration so many Americans have, particularly Republicans, because they're on the receiving end of this, is this dual system of justice. That while it is oftentimes demonstrated by Democrats when they're in charge, it oftentimes also gets demonstrated by Republicans because they don't hold Democrats to the same level of accountability that Democrats hold Republicans. If we have a dual system of justice in this capacity where Republicans who do not comply with the subpoena before Congress go to prison, but Democrats don't, that isn't on Democrats, that's on Republicans. At least in some capacity. I suspect, as I imagine you do as well, that if in fact this physician decides that he is going to ignore the subpoena, that he will not receive the same level of justice that the rest of us, or that people who are Trump supporters or Republicans, would be dealt as Steve Bannon was. Which feeds into the recognition by so many Americans that we don't have a blind justice system in this country. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. Emily says Maggie is amazing. Helped our family over the years find multiple homes. She answers every call, every text. She gets things done and is so incredibly sweet to work with, which oftentimes the nice factor doesn't accompany the get her done and get it done well factor. Oftentimes, people who are able to get things done and maximize the outcome for the client, it's because there's some sort of rabid bulldog that can bully people. But to get the combination that is explained here by Maggie of somebody that really does get it done for the client, but isn't mean, is actually a nice person, but just knows how to get it done, is a fantastic combination. Chad said, I can't say enough good things about Emily Johnson. We're in the market for such a long time. She was patient, helpful, went far beyond what any other realtor we've worked with has gone to make sure that we got into a great home. She helped find the right contractor, get our place updated, made the paperwork a breeze. She negotiated hard when we needed it, and she got us a great price on a home our whole family loves. Thank you so much, Emily. That is Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. Speaking of good deals, sometimes we talk about we've got the local for less, Ozarks, and this is usually when there's a new one. It launches on a Friday at 10 a.m., and it's where you pretty much a half-price deal. So you spend $50 and you get a $100 certificate for somewhere or some variation of that. And there are a few that are currently active. I wanted to mention these because I probably don't mention it as often as I should, so you know about them. And one of them is for adventure seekers. This is a place in Branson. And then there is also X Golf, a golf simulator bay where you can purchase a certificate for an hour. But one that I wanted to mention in particular because it is a place that I frequent, and they're a relatively new client, but it is the Farm to Table Missouri Meat Market, $50 gift certificates for $25. I'm just telling you, this is a good deal. These are great folks. They're local. They can tell you exactly, oh, these ribs came from this farm over here. These rib eyes came from over here. This pork belly comes from over there. And then they have their own processing plant in Texas County. And so they're able to cut out all of the middlemen that oftentimes cause the pricing to go up. And it is that straight farm to table. It is their location is in it's on South Campbell. What's that? Is that Parkcrest Center? Is that what it's? I always forget the name of it. It's the strip mall that is just south of the Green Walkover Bridge on Primrose on South Campbell, and across from Krispy Kreme there is Wild Birds Unlimited in there, and Harbor Freight. Post office facilities at the end. So it is in there. It's
Yeah, it is the Park Crest.
Okay, Parkcrest, yes. So, all right, I got that right.
And there's only 2 of those left.
There's 2 of them left. I would purchase them myself because I spend money with these people, but I would rather it go to somebody who's never been there before because that helps them introduce, themselves to you if you've never been there. James Clary, I don't know if you've heard the ads. That's the company he talks about getting meat from, and of course, given just his reputation as a chef, tremendous credibility there. But I thought, oh, I'm going to buy these up because I shop there. But I'd much rather one of you have the opportunity to get them. So given that there were only a couple left, I suspect that they'll be gone very, very soon. And if you don't grab one, it's still well worth your time to swing by there and just check out what they have. They've got some things just beyond, even, little dog treats that are harvested from some of their farms and a lot of great stuff there. So that is Farm to Table Missouri Meat Market. And, if at this point there are any of those left, I recommend that you do grab those up. Weather in a moment, I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a slight chance for scattered showers in the afternoon, otherwise mostly sunny with a high near 88. Tonight mostly cloudy with a low around 70. For your Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 88. And looking ahead at Thursday, sunny skies with a high near 90.
So it's being reported that, although it hasn't officially been announced, TSA is going to stop requiring people to take their shoes off.
I saw that.
Yeah. All righty. Do you know when that started? Do you remember when that started?
I'm going to assume after 9/11.
Well, it was after 9/11, but not because of 9/11.
Okay.
There was an incident in which a passenger attempted to light his shoes because he had explosives in his shoes.
Oh, geez.
And so they were in flight, and it was a lighter or matches he was trying to use in order to ignite these bombs that were built into his shoes. Passengers, I don't know that they knew exactly what was going on at the time, but they knew this doesn't look good, and so he was subdued by passengers. I remember this for a couple of reasons. One, because it was not long after 9/11, I believe, and it was this new approach that was being taken, but also because at the time the government was kind of bragging about, see, we're on top of things, and I was like, but you didn't stop him. It was passengers that tackled the guy and held him down and restrained him. That wasn't a government thing. And so the policy then became, you have to take your shoes off and run them through the x-ray machine in order to see whether or not there were bombs in people's shoes. So that's where all that came from. But that should move things along a little more quickly, I imagine. I want to read to you, I think that these are so fantastic back to back. Now, the first is a press release from June 28th, 2024. On the website, and it still is on the website of the mayor of Washington, D.C. And it's titled, Mayor Bowser Announces Minimum Wage Increase Effective July 1st, 2024. Today, Mayor Muriel Bowser and the Department of Employment Services reminds the community that effective July 1st, 2024, so this had been a year ago, the district's minimum wage will increase from the current $17 per hour rate to $17.50 per hour for non-tipped workers and from $8 per hour to $10 per hour for tipped employees. Quote, district employers play a crucial role in our local economy, said Dr. Unique Morris Hughes, Director of the Department of Employment Services. We aim to ensure that all businesses are informed about the district's full minimum wage increase to maintain compliance and guarantee that workers receive their rightful earnings. In 2016, as part of her commitment to create more pathways to the middle class for Washingtonians across all 8 wards, Mayor Bowser championed the fight for 15 and then signed the Fair Shot Minimum Wage Amendment of 2016 into law to raise the district's minimum wage to $15 per hour by 2020. Here is a story, D.C. News Now. Yesterday, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser said she plans to repeal Initiative 82 under her proposed 2026 budget, reverting the district to its previous tipped minimum wage policy. Bowser said the economy we're dealing with, the environment for restaurants, is vastly different than the economy and the environment that restaurants were operating in when the ballot measure was advanced. The proposal comes as the mayor aims to transform D.C.'s economy, which significantly shifted after the federal government cut tens of thousands of jobs. In all, cuts are expected to eliminate 40,000 jobs in the district. Quote, we are a hospitality-based economy. Following the federal government, it's the hospitality sector that allows people to buy homes, put their kids through college, live here, and afford to live here. So if the restaurant closes, there are no jobs, said the mayor. So in other words, what she's doing here is utilizing an executive order to repeal the minimum wage increase for tipped workers because she's arguing that it actually hurts the workers. That restaurants are struggling, They are having to let people go because the cost of the employees has become too high. And in some instances, they're flat out closing. Well, golly gee whiz, who could have ever seen that coming? Having government come in and tell a business, you know what? We don't like what you're paying people, so we are going to force you to pay this much for an entry-level person. Chef Rock Harper, owner of Hill Prince, said the impact of the minimum wage increase has been that it has shifted everything for us in D.C. He said that increase is not the only challenge impacting restaurants in the district, but he said it's one of the factors, quote, we've had to lay off staff, increase responsibilities for people, shifted responsibilities around. The increase is one of many factors. I want to be very clear about that. It is tough. Increased cost of everything, staff shortages, increased rent, everything. Paul Schwab, Executive Secretary-Treasurer of Unite Here Local 25, said that the people of D.C. have voted twice now to raise wages for servers. It's clearly a decisive issue for voters. So he is against the mayor's attempt here to utilize executive order to overturn this. Now, I don't know if she's able to or not. I don't know. This is what she said. She's going to do it. Now, this is just perfect for a couple of reasons. One, the reality she is citing is the reality that many of us, all the time, this is the way that it works. This is not an unusual circumstance. You artificially, and by artificially I mean it's nothing that the marketplace is demanding. If it were, then the wages would be there already. So you artificially utilize government as a tool to force businesses to pay a certain entry-level amount. Who is it that ultimately suffers every time? It isn't rich people. Doesn't matter to them so much. They probably don't even notice. But it is what is left of the middle class and certainly lower class in areas like Washington, D.C. They are the ones who suffer. They are the ones who lose their jobs. They are the ones who get evicted from their homes. Yet over and over and over again, the left pushes these minimum wage increases. And Josh Hawley does too on a federal level. Of course, we've talked about that. But usually, it's almost always, again, Josh Hawley being the exception, it's the left-wing politicians that push this stuff. It's also just so wonderful because of the messaging behind why it is that they push for these minimum wage increases. That's because it's the only humane thing to do. These people can't afford to live otherwise. So that doesn't apply any longer. In fact, on Bowers, again, I'm surprised this hasn't been removed from the mayor's website, in which she is touted as doing this because that is how you, quote, create pathways to the middle class. So she's now opposed to this pathway to the middle class? Is this what we're supposed to believe? This is the rhetoric that her own office has used for the rationale behind that minimum wage increase, is to open up those opportunities. She's going to rip them away now? Well, of course not. Because when the left does it, it's reasonable. It's fine. Makes perfect sense. It's, once again on full display. In this particular case, the acknowledgement by the mayor of one of the most left-wing areas of the country, admitting that the policies that they constantly push harm the very people that they claim that they're trying to help. And it oftentimes does not get acknowledged. It gets ignored. But because of the vast number of restaurants that happen to be in that particular area. I mean, this is a massive segment of the economic population for the District of Columbia, and it apparently is on a scale devastating enough that the mayor is having to just bend to this reality and attempt to, through executive order, which again, I guess she can do that. I don't know how it works in District of Columbia, but repeal that increase of minimum wage, and specifically for tipped workers. Reality's a funny thing, isn't it? Now, will the media outlets nationally utilize this story as an example of what happens when you have government forcing companies to pay what it is that politicians say, that the government says, or that people vote and then use as a mechanism of enforcement, the government, to impose these artificial increases? Or are we going to see, oh, this is what happens? Of course not. Because too often, the truth conflicts with Democrat ideology. And when the Democrats are the ones writing the news, they tend to not want to focus on such things so much. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. The Texas flooding that, well, the flash flooding that, of course, has just overtaken some of these areas, has really demonstrated the full spectrum of best in humanity and worst of humanity. The best of humanity, people that have stepped up, that have many individuals given their lives in order to try to save others. Seeing the community come together. And then the worst are people who immediately figure, how can we use this against our political opposition? It's just depraved, horrible, awful. And I know human lives are human lives, but I think that for most people, whenever you have children involved, it just hits a little bit harder. And have people running around trying to figure out a way to blame Donald Trump? What is wrong with you? This isn't to say that when something like this occurs and we get past the all hands on deck rescue, search and rescue situation, that there shouldn't be an evaluation, because there should be, all right, were there things in the system that could be better that would prevent something like this from occurring in the future? That's a perfectly not just reasonable, but I think it's a required response. But this exhausting Trump's fault, Trump's fault, Trump's fault. Are you out of your mind? Now, fortunately, there are a lot of people in the world of meteorology that are saying this narrative that is being spread by the left is untrue. A few different pieces here highlighting on this. Daily Caller, the left's anti-Trump narrative about the Friday floods in Texas clashed with assertions from multiple meteorologists who claim that the National Weather Service did exactly what it was supposed to do. ABC's George Stephanopoulos reported Saturday that, quote, there were significant staffing shortfalls to the National Weather Service offices in the region. Ryan Mao, a popular weatherman with a PhD in meteorology from Florida State University, called Stephanopoulos' reporting grotesque information, noting that NWS in Texas, in fact, had extra staff on duty and did their jobs admirably as always. So it's the opposite of what these networks, the lack of any sort of embarrassment, the lack of any sort of and just throwing out things that are completely contrary to reality. When we're talking about life and death situations, all for the purpose of trying to make it look like Donald Trump is responsible for this. Mao linked an Associated Press article to his statements, revealing that the National Weather Service actually had extra staff on duty for the flooding in a separate post. The office in New Braunfels, Texas, which forecasts for Austin, San Antonio, and the wider region, had additional staff on duty, NWS meteorologist Jason Runyon told the Associated Press. Quote, there were extra people in here that night, and that is typical in every weather service office. You staff up for an event and bring people in on overtime and hold people over. Runyon's assertions run counter to other legacy media reports like a Saturday report from the New York Times, which claimed crucial positions at the local offices of the National Weather Service were unfilled as severe rainfall inundated parts of central Texas on Friday morning. CNN senior national security analyst Juliette Kamen added to the noise Saturday, tweeting, quote, MAGA and RW media seem very upset today as a chorus of us experts discuss the impact of cuts to weather forecasting. I'm guessing this is supposed to be U.S. expert. I don't know. It's not capitalized, no punctuation. It is CNN, after all. Again, however, local meteorologists rejected claims that the National Weather Service was in any way diminished. Avery Tomasco, an Austin, Texas-based meteorologist with CBS, tweeted the National Weather Service issued a flood watch for Kerr County more than 12 hours ahead of the catastrophic flood. A flash flood warning was issued for Hunt and Ingram 3 hours before the Guadalupe started to climb. They did their job, and they did it well. This is Washington Examiner? One of these two is Washington Examiner. As Texas battled floods over the weekend, some politicians, commentators rushed to blame the Trump administration for the ensuing devastation. In a post on X, Democrat Senator Chris Murphy suggested that Trump's Department of Government Efficiency could have exacerbated the crisis in Texas by cutting staff and funding from federal weather agencies. Murphy writing, accurate weather forecasting helps avoid fatal disasters. There are consequences to Trump's brainless attacks on public workers like meteorologists. Chuck Schumer echoed Murphy's false claims in a letter urging the Commerce Department's Inspector General to investigate whether staffing shortages hindered local official response time. CNN host Dana Bash suggested the same thing in an interview with Representative Joaquin Castro, Democrat of Texas, who said, quote, I don't think it's helpful to have missing key personnel from the National Weather Service not in place to help prevent these tragedies. But meteorologists have largely concluded that local officials perform their jobs to the best of their ability and that they were not hindered by any federal cuts. They said that the floods were simply the result of a rare confluence of circumstances, a worst-case scenario. A Houston-based meteorologist wrote in a blog post, in this particular case, we have seen absolutely nothing to suggest that current staffing or budget issues within NOAA and the NWS played any role at all in this event. Anyone using this claim or this event to claim that is being dishonest. In response to the claim that staffing vacancies at the National Weather Service's local weather forecast offices exacerbated the disaster, Tom Fahey, the legislative director for the agency's labor union, noted that there were employees acting in vacant leadership roles, so they weren't actively vacant. Saturday, per NBC News, he noted that the weather forecasting offices had adequate staffing and resources as they issued timely forecasts and warnings leading up to the storm. Rather than blaming Doge cuts, meteorologists say the devastation can be explained by the difficulties of predicting flash flooding in such a specific area. Chris Vagassi, a meteorologist from Wisconsin, noted that quantitative precipitation forecasting, called QPF, is one of the hardest things meteorologists have to do. The reality is that the state of the science does not allow us to know that a small location like the South Fork of the Guadalupe River is going to get 8 inches of rain in a 3-hour period, even a couple of hours ahead of time. This was truly a low probability worst-case scenario where the absolute maximum in rainfall happened to coincide with the headwaters of a particular flash flood-prone river with a lot of human beings along it. In this case, it also happened in the middle of the night on the 4th of July, exacerbating the human toll. So, again, this idea that somehow, and not even the idea, but just the overt, proactive attempt by elected Democrats and people in the media to tie this to the Trump administration when all of the people actually involved, including meteorologists just who know about how these weather things occur, are all saying that is not true. That is so completely dishonest. But there's no shame. These are people who culturally and collectively jump on the opportunity to capitalize off of over, at this point, 100 dead human beings, including many children. I don't believe soullessness is an actual thing, but if it were, this is what it would look like. In the upcoming hour, play some audio. White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt answering a question from someone in the media that the question was, why is it that they issued these warnings in the middle of the night? And you could almost, she was trying to not answer in a way that I think demonstrated the stupidity of the question. The answer was because that's when the flash flooding was, that's when they knew that something was wrong. That's how it works. Lead times are much different for events. For example, the difference between a hurricane versus a tornado. I mean, can you imagine asking, why did the tornado sirens go off at 2 a.m? Because that's when the tornado was happening? You don't really have an 8-hour lead time on something like that. These sometimes I don't know how somebody like her does her job. We'll have some of that audio plus more coming up in the upcoming hour. Also, this attempt of an ambush on ICE agents as Democrats continue to ramp up rhetoric, trying to convince the American people that they are no different than Nazis. I'm sure no connection there whatsoever. Ozarks Elder Law. They're your planning folks. Whether it is that much needed planning by legal experts for the day that you eventually pass on, or maybe it is a medical power of attorney situation. Someone in your family is getting to the point where they are not going to be able to reliably make medical decisions for themselves. And this is sort of the problem that oftentimes occurs in a situation like that, is if they get cognitively speaking to the point that they are believed to not be in their right mind, then they cannot sign over that medical decision-making power to you, because in the government's view, they're not in their right mind. And so the government slips in there and they start making those decisions. And that is a very difficult thing to undo. Every one of these instances, whether it is not properly planning for when you pass on, or not properly planning for when it is that somebody may need to handle your power of making medical decisions and so forth, the government's always the one in the corner, the dark corner, just waiting to slip in and take control. It doesn't mean they're necessarily bad people and they're doing it for nefarious purposes, but they are not the folks ultimately that should be making these decisions about who gets what and about who takes care of your mom or your dad or your son or your daughter. You should be the one that does that. Your family should be the one that does that. And that's what Ozarks Elder Law makes sure happens. Now, free consultation. Visit with them, one of their 10 area locations, and then they'll let you know, here's what you need to do to be secure. And maybe you've done something in the past. You're like, well, I had a will drawn up 20 years ago. Bring that in. I'm sure they'll ask you anyhow, but you want to bring all that info, let them do an evaluation, and then they'll have up front, they'll say, here's what it's going to cost in order to get this done properly, so you don't get nickeled and dimed. It's a one price, not hourly wage or not hourly billing that you get. So you know up front what it's going to take in order to make sure that you are securing your future and your family's future with Ozarks Elder Law. And again, at ozarkselderlaw.com, you can get information, including contact info, or visit Nick's Endorsements, KSGF.com. You can find their info there as well. I wanted to play audio. Yesterday, there were, obviously, in the White House, a lot of questions being asked about the response to, and what many people felt was a lack of response to, the flooding that has taken place in Texas. Flash flooding is so completely unpredictable at times. And water is so powerful. And if you're talking about at night, particularly in some of these areas that are away from, a lot of lights like you might have in the city, I can just only imagine the frightening and disorienting nature of waking up in the middle of the night and it's dark and water's running. It's just such a horrifying thing to think about. And it's been reported that when it comes to natural disasters, flash flooding that's the number one killer of people when it comes to natural disasters. Not hurricanes, not tornadoes, not wildfires, not lightning strikes. It's this. This is the sort of thing, and it's because it can happen so fast. And someone had noted, and I thought this was a really good point as well, aside from the fact that much of this is occurring at night, in the dark, when you're talking about a camp, you're generally talking about a lot of people that don't even know the area very well anyhow. It's one thing if something like this occurs in your neighborhood and you have some concept of the landscape. Perhaps you know where higher ground is. That is not something you might be familiar with, on top of all of the other insurmountable challenges that you may be facing in a particular tragedy or situation, emergency like this. There was a Hearst television White House correspondent by the name of Kaylin Norwood yesterday that asked Caroline Leavitt, White House press secretary, why the flood alerts were sent while people were sleeping. And so here she answers that, but she also steps through, and I thought this was instructive, just explaining, at least as of yesterday, and they seem to have a really good grasp on exactly what sort of systems kicked in, what sort of warnings were issued in the lead up to the flash flooding.
Question on the flooding in Texas. I know there knowing that they did go out, but the warnings coming out in the wee hours, so while many people were likely sleeping. Can you share just details what you know about why those warnings were sent while people were likely sleeping, and then what the administration is doing to ensure that these alerts come out sooner?
Well, the alerts imminently were sent out before the flood when people were sleeping because the flood hit in the very early hours of the morning. So people were sleeping in the middle of the night when this flood came. That was an act of God. It's not the administration's fault that the flood hit when it did. But there were early and consistent warnings. And again, the National Weather Service did its job. On July 2nd, there were initial notices of potential weather and flooding risks were issued. On July 3rd, escalating warnings throughout the day with a flood watch issued at 1:18 p.m. And then later at 6:10 p.m. on July 3rd, the Weather Prediction Center warned of excessive rainfall and a high likelihood of flash flooding. At 6:22 p.m. July 3rd, National Weather Center issued a hydraulic warning highlighting considerable flooding risks, including in Caryville County. And then there were the timely flash flood alerts at 11:41 p.m., 1:14 a.m., and then another flash flood emergency warning issued at 4:03 a.m. just before the flood hit. So those were all of the warnings that went out to the affected area and region.
I want to just note the vast difference from this administration to previous administrations when it comes to information, let alone detailed information. You look at, for example, the flooding and the hurricane issue and the administration being completely absent on that. The train derailment, completely absent. I mean, it was constantly it was like pulling teeth just to get information out of the administration. And oftentimes, I still remember Biden when finally he made it down to South Carolina, and then claimed that everybody that were victims of the flooding were perfectly happy with everything. They had everything they needed while people were still stranded. I mean, just that versus here, while still search and rescue is occurring, and this specific timeline of you can say what you want about this administration, but one of the things that they have demonstrated is that they are on top of getting and then dispersing whatever information is available before anyone is even ready to ask the questions. The Washington Examiner has a story that does note that, and some of this stuff you just don't know how much of a difference it would have made, but sirens. And the Washington Examiner is reporting that Kerr County lacked what was called the last mile warning to send the National Weather Service alerts before the flood. Kerr County, Texas lacked the last mile warning mechanism that could have saved residents before the deadly floods devastated the area, including the children's summer camp, killing more than 80 people. The count is up to 104 as of this morning. The county received multiple weather alerts before the water rose on Friday, but the county is not equipped with a siren system that could have woken up residents who were sleeping during the storm and did not see the National Weather Service alerts on their electronic devices. Tom Fahey, the legislative director of a NWS union, said the crux of this disaster is a failure of the last mile of communication. The forecast went out. They communicated the forecast, they disseminated the watches and the warnings, and the dilemma we have is there was nobody listening at 4 o'clock in the morning for these watches and warnings. Some Central Texas cities use sirens to warn residents of extreme weather events such as floods or tornadoes, but Kerr County Judge Rob Kelly said the systems are expensive and that, quote, taxpayers won't pay for it. Nevertheless, he seemed to criticize forecasts, saying at a press conference that we didn't know this kind of flood was coming. Now, I don't know what his play in this as a county judge, and his assertion that taxpayers wouldn't pay for it. I don't know. He doesn't note here this is something that they voted on and voted down, or if he is just suspecting that they would not support it. The Washington Examiner notes that cuts at NWS, National Weather Service, have been criticized by Democrats, including Chuck Schumer, who wrote a letter to the Commerce Department Inspector General asking him to investigate whether the cuts affected the flooding event. One of the top questions Schumer posed was whether vacancies at the NWS affected their coordination with emergency officials. John Sokich, former director of congressional affairs for the National Weather Service, said reduced staffing puts that in jeopardy. But Fahey said, and we read numerous stories of meteorologists and officials all over the place, including those with the National Weather Service, says it's totally BS and it's dishonest to make that claim. In this Washington Examiner piece, Fahey said the National Weather Service San Angelo and the National Weather Service Austin San Antonio were all hands on deck to make sure that they were staffed during the flooding, and added they knew this was a critical life and death situation. Bodies and lives were on the line in this one. And we have subsequently learned that they were actually overstaffed. They had more people than would normally be needed. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt noted that one of the offices was overstaffed. Quote, there were record-breaking lead times in the lead-up to the catastrophe. In fact, one of the offices was overstaffed. They had more people than they needed. Blaming President Trump for these floods is a depraved lie. In the lead-up to this tragic natural disaster, the National Weather Service did its job. Cell phone alerts went out hours before the flooding began, giving residents time to prepare if they saw them before the flooding escalated near dawn on Friday. Climate scientist Daniel Swain said any claims that the National Weather Service did not foresee the flooding are simply not true. Writing on a Blue Sky post, this was undoubtedly an extreme event, but messaging rapidly escalated beginning 12 hours prior. Flood watch mid-PM, heads-up outlook late PM, flash flood warnings 1 a.m. This truly was a sudden and massive event and occurred at worst possible times middle of the night. But problem, once again, was not a bad weather prediction. It was one of the last-mile forecast warning dissemination, which, of course, is the sirens that were lacking specifically in Kerr County. Swain noted the portion of Texas affected by the floods is infamous for sudden and violent flood risks. Reporters press Kerrville City Manager Dalton Rice on why emergency officials had not done more to notify or evacuate the public, but he said that they were focused on the missing victims. Rice also said officials did not want to cry wolf and issue evacuation notices too early. He said some first responders were swept away by floodwaters when they were driving in the area in need, saying it's very tough to make those calls. And I think that there is truth to that. It is very, very easy to sit from afar, and then when one notes, well, if something had been done this way or that way, then perhaps it could have turned out better. And I believe in making those evaluations, but just to, as you know, an observer, watching and observing the news, to think that something was done in a negligent fashion because it didn't turn out the best way possible, that's not a fair assumption to make. Now, there was a vote in the Texas legislature earlier this year that failed, and it would have bolstered local disaster warning systems and included a grant program for counties to buy new emergency communication equipment. Republican State Rep Wes Verdell, who represents nearby Brady and voted against the bill, said he would probably change his vote after seeing the disaster, saying, I could tell you in hindsight, watching what it takes to deal with a disaster like this, my vote would probably be different now. Now, of course, that vote wouldn't have anything to do. I mean, that vote was earlier this year. And so even if it had been approved, not that it isn't necessary or a good idea, but had it been approved, would not have kicked in until who knows when, and then the money would get disseminated, and then you'd have certain jurisdictions that would be determining how that money would be funded. So even if it is something that would be utilized in order to pay for that siren system, it clearly isn't something that would have been set up. So while it might be a good idea and perhaps something that they will revisit, odds are they probably will, and make sure that there is this sort of funding so counties that don't currently have that final step of sounding a siren in order to let people know as an additional form of communication that there is some sort of emergency. It's nothing that would have been in play and operational to stop this particular event from occurring. Sometimes, despite best efforts, best practices, overstaffed, all hands on deck, there's still unknowns that are going to occur. Even, let's say, with the Kerr County and the sirens going off, I don't know that would, I mean, here it is, it's a camp. If you're talking about a camp being affected in the middle of the night, 4 a.m., mass numbers of kids, I imagine it's, what transportation would be available? I know as a kid going to camp, the transportation that you're like, well, these kids are there. Well, our parents dropped us off, or parents drop you off at church, and then the church takes a bus over there, and then the bus goes back to the church. So it isn't necessarily as if there was the sort of transportation there that would have allowed for a mass evacuation. And even if a mass evacuation would go underway at that point, does that mean that they wouldn't be flooded in anyhow? And these are things that perhaps can be determined, but, sometimes even when the best system is in place, there are things that are going to occur in which unavoidably people end up losing their lives. And I'm sure there is going to be a lot of evaluation of this. And frankly, there may be some, quote, answers that don't really or would not have had an impact on this particular situation, but there's this instinct, well, we've got to try something. We have to look like we're doing something. And so oftentimes things are put into place that aren't going to be helpful in that same sort of situation in the future, but this is just what we do. It's a bad situation in which horrifically over 100 people at this point have died, but sometimes there were not any reasonable, foreseeable action that could have been taken in order to prevent certainly all of these deaths, and maybe arguably any of them. Unfortunately, and we've watched it already play out, people trying to use this for political purposes, and those are people that, to me, demonstrate they don't have any respect for human life. Latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a slight chance for scattered showers in the afternoon, otherwise mostly sunny with a high near 88. Tonight mostly cloudy with a low around 70. For your Wednesday, mostly sunny skies with a high near 88. And looking at Thursday, sunny with a high near 90.
As I noted that, once upon a time in this country, tragedy brought everyone together across the political spectrum. And it no longer does that. We are observing that display with the flash flooding that has taken over 100 lives, last count, in Texas. And while I would argue just straight up normal people are reacting in a normal fashion, you have some people on the left that are trying to use this in order to make Donald Trump the bad guy, or that are even saying some of these people had it coming to them. A medical professional by the name of Christina Probst, a Houston, Texas pediatrician, gloated about those who were killed, posting, "May all visitors, children, non-MAGA voters, and pets be safe and dry. Kerr County MAGA voted to gut FEMA. They deny climate change. May they get what they voted for." And then a snarky "bless their hearts." This is a woman who is a pediatrician. Now, she has lost her job. And I would argue that she should, not because she said something politically inconvenient, but if that's your, particularly when it comes to kids, you should not be in a profession in which you are entrusted to help people. If you gloat over people losing their lives because they disagree with you politically, you should not have medical power over people. You're a psychopath. You shouldn't be around people at all, probably. Meanwhile, a Houston official fired over complaining about the fact that, all these, why does anybody care? It's just white Christian kids. The gal, Sadie Perkins is her name. She was appointed to a board, I'm not even sure what board, some government board by then Democrat Mayor Sylvester Turner of Houston, posting a video saying, I know I'm probably going to get canceled for this, but Camp Mystic is a whites-only girls camp, Christian camp. They don't even have a token Asian. They don't have a token black person. It's all white-only conservative Christian camp. If you ain't white, you ain't right. You ain't getting anywhere. You're going, period. And I think that context needs to be said in this matter. It's not to say we don't want the girls to be found, whatever girls that are missing or whatever right now, but you best believe, especially in today's political climate, if this were a group of Hispanic girls, especially with them being in East Texas, it should be most likely Hispanics. If this were a group of Hispanic girls out there, this would not begin this type of coverage that they're getting. No one would give a blank. And all of these white girls, the parents of these little white girls would be saying things like they need to be deported, they shouldn't have been here in the first place, yada, yada, yada. The current mayor of Houston has removed that individual from she was on the Food Insecurity Board. And the irony here, of course, is this is true projection, claiming that people wouldn't care if they were Hispanic girls because, racist white people, DEI, CRT, when she's the one that's openly complaining about the fact that people care so much because they're white. Meanwhile, over on MSNBC, and this is just absolutely perfect, because they can't pin any sort of negligence on Trump or Doge cuts on Trump to blame this. What the new angle is, complaining that he's doing too good of a job. And he doesn't do this good of a job as president responding to disasters if it isn't MAGA country. And they point to the fires out in California and the fact that when it comes to some of the federal funding, there were strings attached, and that strings being that it actually has to be used in order to do meaningful things to try to prevent future fires from breaking out. And because the Trump administration said, if you're going to continue to use these dollars that are supposed to be used in a way that prevents disasters like that from occurring, but instead you're going to divert them to other projects, you're not going to get the money. The money is for one thing and one thing only. And that money is to make sure that future disasters like this are less likely to occur. According to MSNBC and Democrats, those are political strings that are attached. You know, making sure that people's lives are going to potentially be safer. And the angle being that, well, he's doing such a good job as president overseeing this, and the administration from a national level is doing such a good job that it proves that he's politically driven because he did not do that good of a job when it came to the fires in LA. And of course, the biggest obstacle for the fires in the Los Angeles area were the Democrats that tried to block all of the successful efforts that they were attempting to undertake. Gaslighting, projection, same consistent response you get from the left in this country, particularly when it comes to these disasters. We have a happy hour coming up on Friday. That's right. We will be at Retro Metro. If you're not joining us for a happy hour, it's 4 to 6. Come and go as you please. Hang out, have some drinks, have some food, and just kick off the weekend with some good friends. So that will, no reservations, none of that. So just like we're friends hanging out. So swing by Retro Metro 4 to 6 this Friday for our happy hour. We've got traffic update now. I'm Nick Reed.
Fields Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a slight chance for scattered showers in the afternoon, otherwise mostly sunny with a high near 88. Tonight mostly cloudy with a low around 70. For your Wednesday, mostly sunny with a high near 88. And taking a look ahead at Thursday, sunny skies with a high near 90. And the Pyramid Roofing Company, if your roof is older, damaged from recent storms, or just showing signs of wear and tear, summer is the time to act. The Pyramid team, they offer free roof inspections. They specialize in residential, commercial, and metal roofing services, and they also work closely with your insurance company, helping you navigate that process and making sure that nothing gets overlooked. So whether you need a whole new roof or just a simple roof repair, the Pyramid Roofing Company team has got you covered for all of your roofing needs. You can schedule that free roof inspection with Josh today, and you can find all of their contact information under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
With all of the attempts to, blame Trump and make false claims that, National Weather Service was understaffed because of these things are all proven to be disinformation. There are still some that bring up the good old-fashioned climate change. Flooding has never occurred before, and it's just the denial of science, the denial of reality, this idea that it is about as anti-science as you can get. Increasingly, people on the left are abandoning this because it's so scientifically proven to be untrue, but there's still some of those bitter clingers there that want to blame everything on climate change. Okay. All right. I want to give you the latest update. There was a planned ambush in which 10 people have been arrested, the planned ambush on ICE agents. This, of course, after weeks and months of Democrats creating a narrative that ICE agents are Nazis, they're the Klan, that they are sexually abusing migrants and all of these horrible things. You do that long enough and you are going to have some of your followers believe that it is incumbent upon them to take out as many of them as possible, and that is what has happened recently. But before we get to some audio regarding this, I saw a posting that was made regarding the issue of illegal immigration on social media, and it's not the first time I've seen this. But it's one of these instances in which I'm assuming they are trying to make a point that is the opposite of one that they are actually making. And so there was a posting, and it's a picture of a verse in the Bible. And it says, in case you forgot this part. It's Leviticus 19:33-34. And it says, do not mistreat foreigners living in your country, but treat them just as you treat your own citizens. Love foreigners as you love yourselves, because you were foreigners at one time in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Now, just the overall tone of the responses to this, it seems to me as if this is supposed to be an argument for allowing people who broke the law to get into this country to stay in this country. Which, the verses about obey the laws of the land and so forth come into play. But regarding this particular verse, there is a point here that actually I believe is the opposite of what the point that is trying to be made. And that is, this is kind of what a lot of us want. We want people who have come into this country illegally and broken our laws to be treated just like we would be if we break the law. Treat them just as you treat your own citizens. Yeah, that's what I would like. That's what most people who are supportive of deportation want. That people who come into this country illegally, that are foreigners, be treated just like I'm treated as a citizen. And that is, if you don't obey the law, you are held accountable for it. I don't understand why it is so difficult for this concept to be understood. It apparently is so difficult for some people to understand. They post something like this, not realizing they are making the argument for enforcing the law. I know I've drawn the analogy on a number of occasions regarding driver's license. If I want to drive a vehicle, I have to go through a process. I have to take a test. I have to pay the government money. Then I have to go get the paperwork proving that I paid the money and that I took and passed the test. And I have to keep that form of, the paperwork that I received back, the identification. I have to keep that on me in order to prove that I am legally able to drive a vehicle. I want people who are in this country illegally to be held to the exact same standard I am. I don't get to drive around illegally and then just claim I just need to get around when I get arrested. I don't claim I have to get to the grocery store. I have to get, okay, fine, but you still have to get a driver's license. I don't get to claim that, well, I just want a better life and I have to drive. I'd do anything to be able to drive. Well, except get a driver's license? One of the arguments that I've heard when it comes to, it's supposed to stir sympathy of individuals who are, I don't know how true this is or not, but I've heard some people say, well, they're here legally, but, there's additional paperwork that they have to get in order to prove that they're here legally, and they just haven't done it because it's an additional burden. And so they shouldn't be deported because they didn't do that. Again, the driver's license. I can go pass the test, but I still have to go to another office, show that I passed the test, pay money, and then get the paperwork to prove it. I don't get to just dismiss that part of it because it's an additional step that I, quote, shouldn't have to take. Now, aside from my belief that we shouldn't have to do any of that to drive a vehicle, the fact of the matter is, despite the fact that I don't think that we should, I still have to do it. And so when I see somebody, presumably in the name of supporting illegal immigration, post a Bible verse saying, in case you forgot this part, do not mistreat foreigners living in your country, but treat them just as you treat your own citizens, yes, that is what I would like. I would like people in this country illegally to be held accountable when they violate our laws, when they don't go through the steps that they are legally supposed to go through in order to be here. I want them to be held accountable just like I, as a citizen, am held accountable if I don't comply. That seems like a pretty reasonable request. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Hardscapes and Outdoor, absolute top-level premium design, product, talent, skill. This is what they do. It's not one of 80 different things that they do. And they are they're highly sought after. I tell you this now, so fully ahead of time if you're thinking, oh, well, we want this project done and, get here in a couple weeks, right? Or I book it now, maybe next Monday. They are booked out a ways. You're looking at autumn. So if you're thinking this is something that we want to do, we want to have this outdoor living space. It'd be perfect for, Thanksgiving or Halloween or whatever it might be. But the weather's going to be cold. To get those custom built-in smokeless fire pits among so many of the other features that they can create for you. But if that is the time frame you're looking at, reach out to them now. You can visit hunterhardscapes.com. That's the site. There's an estimate calendar, so you can get just a ballpark idea of what it is going to cost you in order to create an outdoor living space beyond what you may already have. Maybe you have nothing whatsoever, so this is a way for you to dramatically increase the value of your home and just for your own personal pleasure to utilize that space that thus far isn't being used. And there's before and after pictures of some of the local projects, so you can see what that looks like as well. hunterhardscapes.com. Yesterday, acting U.S. Attorney Nancy Larson making an announcement regarding arrest of 10 individuals that on the heels of increased calls by Democrats that ICE agents are Nazis and members of the Klan, that they are a terrorist organization, as some members of Congress have done, or at least one specifically. There was an attempt to ambush members of ICE, and this is a press conference in which the announcement of the arrest is being made.
We're here to tell you that late at night on July 4th, Friday night at approximately 10:37 p.m. at the Prairieland ICE Detention Center in Alvarado, Texas, 10 to 12 individuals dressed in black military-style clothing began shooting fireworks and engaging in acts of vandalism at the facility. And this was part of an organized attack. Today, my office has charged 10 individuals with 3 counts of attempted murder of a federal officer. Each of the 10 are also charged with 3 counts of discharging a firearm in relation to a crime of violence. Each of these defendants faces a mandatory prison term of 10 years and up to life in prison. An additional co-conspirator was charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy for attempting to conceal and destroy evidence in relation to the attack, and he faces up to 10 years in prison. Let's discuss the incident. It was a planned ambush with the intent to kill ICE corrections officers. Make no mistake, this was not a so-called peaceful protest. It was indeed an ambush.
Also remarking this yesterday on this attack, and of course connected, there was the arrest of 27-year-old Ryan Louis Mosqueda, who opened fire on the Border Patrol facility. This was all part of these increased attacks, and this is the Border Patrol chief on these increased attacks.
So it's not. And as you reported earlier, we've seen our assaults go up dramatically. And you know what? These Border Patrol agents are out there doing their job. They're enforcing the law. They're protecting their communities. We've got Border Patrol agents on the river right now on the Guadalupe assisting with rescue efforts. These agents are outstanding Americans. They're just trying to enforce the law. But all of the rhetoric and the false information that's being put out by the left is just increasing violence against our agents, and it's just unacceptable.
Also last night, after last week, Border Czar Tom Homan warning that this rhetoric from the left is going to, it was just not a matter of if, but when there would be additional attacks on these ICE agents. And here he is last night.
In my view, but your reaction tonight to what could have been a lot worse.
I've been warning about this for 2 months. I think the last time I did your show, Laura, we talked about it. I also talked about it on the Hannity show. That I've been around a long time. I said if the rhetoric didn't decrease significantly, it's going to end up with loss of life. It's going to end up with a use of force, either against a protester turning criminal or against ICE or Border Patrol agent. Someone's going to be seriously injured, if not killed. And of course, the media attacked me. Fear-monger Homan. He's threatening that someone's going to die. Look, I've been around a long time. You got members of Congress, Jayapal, comparing them to terrorists. AOC says we're out there violating people's civil and constitutional rights. You got Jeffries out there running his mouth about the Gestapo. It just the ramped up rhetoric is going to cause a situation where someone loses their life. We saw that today. I was hoping I'd be wrong, but I wasn't. And I'll tell you something else. It's not the end. Unless we stop the hateful rhetoric against ICE and Border Patrol, comparing them to Nazis, there's going to be more situations like that. ICE has already stepped up enforcement posture at their facilities. Border Patrol's done the same thing. But the rhetoric has to stop. They're simply enforcing law that Congress enacted. So for Congress to attack them to enforcing the laws they wrote, it's ridiculous. It's going to end in bloodshed. And I think there will be more bloodshed.
And then there's a just incredible story from Axios yesterday in which they spoke with numerous Democrat lawmakers who are admitting that it is their voters threatening, quote, blood and violence over their frustration that Democrats aren't able to politically stop Donald Trump. And the fact that you have an increased number of Democrats admitting that are elected that it is their supporters that are threatening this violence and a coup, I think is a demonstration of how clear it has become that the Democrat Party has very quickly really formulated itself into a party of violence. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. And Sarah Myers.
Thank you, Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air. The hot days are here, and it's only going to get hotter. If your AC is not keeping up with the heat, it's time to call Russell and the team over at Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air. They are your local experts for both residential and commercial HVAC services. They handle everything from AC tune-ups, service repairs, and full system replacements. If your unit is outdated, they can help you upgrade it with a more energy-efficient system that helps you stay cool, and it can actually save you money in the long run. They also offer indoor air quality testing, which can help identify allergens inside of your home. So if you are a person who suffers from allergies, highly recommend that indoor air quality testing. So whether you need a AC tune-up or maybe it's time to upgrade that unit, reach out to Russell and his team today. You can find all their contact information under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
We'll have to get maybe a little bit more tomorrow into this piece in Axios. It's the fact that they are actually writing a piece based off of conversations with 24 Democrat lawmakers, most of them speaking anonymously, in which they're acknowledging that it's their base that is calling for blood and violence. The fact that that story is even being written by Axios, which is left-leaning, is pretty remarkable. One lawmaker quoted as saying, "Our own base is telling us what we're doing is not good enough. There needs to be blood to grab the attention of the press and the public." Another said their constituents are convinced that, quote, civility isn't working, that we should prepare for violence to, quote, protect our democracy. And a third Democrat lawmaker described some of the messages from people online as crazy blank, saying that some told them to, quote, storm the White House and stuff like that. So tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more on that. Glenn Beck's coming up next. I'm Nick Reed.